Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP, and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. If you're of a certain age, you may remember that prior to 1992, there were just not many obvious references to cannabis in popular culture. Yes, 1960s counterculture, I see you. After the release of Dr. Dre's classic album, The Chronic, that started to really change. Songs, movies, and literature began to openly talk about the plant, and since that moment, 30 years ago, weed has become increasingly mainstream. Now, more than 30 states have legalized medical usage and nearly 20 have okayed recreational use. Tennessee is not among those states. Our climate is good for hemp cultivation, even if our political climate is not. But maybe that's changing. Today, we're going to look at Tennessee's cannabis culture from root to flower. But first, it's time for Add Us. Yes, every Thursday, we're taking time to read the comments so you don't have to. Yes, you know it. You know how it goes. I'm literally encouraging you to add us on Twitter at This Is Nashville, on Instagram at This Is Nashville_WPLN, and at WPLN News on Facebook. Joining me now with a look back at the past week is our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon. What is up, Anna?
Hey, Khalil. It's been kind of a slow week online, but I definitely want to shout out to the Nashville SC fans today when they tuned in earlier this week when we talked about the weekend's game. They are definitely loud when they need to be.
Yes.
And I think we may have turned some of our regular show listeners into soccer fans, too.
What do you mean?
Well, Monday's show was a day after Nashville SC's opening match at their brand new stadium, and we had Kate Guidry on as a guest. She's the bass drummer on the back line, and she leads the NSC chant. And during the show, she gave her pitch for, anyone who wants to come out to a future match.
If you like being loud, if you like cheering, if you like just being in an atmosphere of people that are so passionate about something, I invite you just to come out to a game and just see what it's all about. Sit in the supporter section, or if you don't feel ready for that, sit anywhere else in the stadium. And just, it's something you need to experience at least once, in my opinion.
So after the show, someone took her up on that offer to sit in the supporters section. On Twitter, our listener who goes by Eric from Tennessee reached out to Kate and later shared and added us. I've just joined the NSC Roadies. After yesterday's interview on This Is Nashville, it was an easy decision.
Hey, that's right. And I plan to go to some matches even without a press pass. So what else are our listeners talking about?
So after Tuesday's show on housing, Nick Lindman wrote to us on Twitter saying, I wish you kept the focus of this discussion on social class and not shifted it to examining different groups like immigrants and refugees. I think this is interesting because we are having more conversations in the WPLN newsroom about how can we make sure our reporting serves working class audiences. In this case, we wanted to recognize the unique barriers that immigrants and refugees face when trying to find housing in the city. Like, how if you're new to the country, having a lack of a credit score can definitely impact where you live.
Yeah.
So I reached out to Nick online, but I also want all of our listeners to know that we're planning more shows about housing in the future, since it's something that WPLN is definitely focusing on over the next few months.
Definitely. I really appreciated hearing how immigrant and refugee, the experience is unique in some ways, but I can see where Nick is coming from. We can't give everything away, but WPLN listeners can expect to hear stories focused on specific neighborhoods, resources for anyone searching for housing, and to look into affordable housing solutions.
So that is something that our listeners can definitely keep an ear out for. Another episode that we're planning around is about abortion access in light of recent events. And we'd like to hear from our listeners to help us, guide and shape that conversation. For example, someone emailed us about their concerns on how new abortion restrictions will impact pregnant people in rural Tennessee counties, where healthcare options are already very limited. So if listeners have anything that they'd like to contribute or, send us their questions about abortion access, they can leave us a voice message on our website. This is Nashville.org.
Please do that. Many thanks to our digital lead, Anna Gallegos-Cannon, for this roundup. Anna, same time, same place. We'll see you next week.
Of course, and everyone knows where to find me online.
Don't forget to add us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Let's keep these comments coming. Also, fill out our community survey to let us know what topics you want us to cover at thisisnashville.org. We have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll shed some light on the existing cannabis laws in our state and learn why Delta-8 was in the spotlight in the past legislative session. Do you think Tennessee should legalize marijuana? Tweet us your thoughts at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. It's a pleasant spring evening in East Nashville, and a familiar vehicle is parked at the busy corner of Woodland and North 11th Street. The small blue vintage truck belongs to the Garden family, a local cannabis business, and several employees are here greeting customers, and in between sales, just hanging out.
We're in 5 Points, and this is like the Garden family truck, the blue truck, we call it. We got the fruit stand right here, and then one of our tricycles over there, just kind of hanging out before we, spread apart. This is like a really great local spot, so we have a lot of return customers. So this one, it's like it's an eighth of weed, it's half a gram of wax, and it's covered in keef. That's inside a King Paul, ready to smoke. Those things are a big seller for us. And then again, we have the pre-rolled joints, and those are about like 1.8 grams of our higher THC flower, and that's going to be around like 15 to 17% THC, depending on the strain. First of all, the laws in Davidson County are really lax. Like, for instance, it's decriminalized up to 2 ounces to have any cannabis products, and then there's no regulation on the distillates or anything. And then on top of that, there's other loopholes that we jump through to be able to serve higher THC.
I just love weed. I have a passion for it, and I know a lot about it, so I'm like getting paid to smoke and sell weed every day, like hell yeah.
We're just kind of like hanging out, and then when the phone goes off and it's time for me to venture out into the city, I'll do that. So we do 24-hour delivery service in Nashville. We have a full menu, and we have a phone number that you can text anytime, and we'll basically just communicate with you and help you figure out what it is that you want.
I just served up one of our regular customers. She's always looking for me in this area around 6 o'clock. This is a custom-built cannabis tricycle. It holds edibles on the bottom here. I have high THC. I also have blunts. The tricycle is good because I can go anywhere I want to. I'll travel like to Broadway to meet, to serve the tourists who come to Nashville to like have a good time. And I like to be a part of their experience. It's very fulfilling. We basically started the cannabis industry in Nashville on the strip of Broadway, and we had space from next to Jason Aldean's, and we did a lot of business there on our trucks, and we were the first ones down there. But then bar owners and the parking lot owners decided that they wanted to do it themselves, so they did. It's like I'm the ice cream truck, but like cannabis style.
Reminds me of friends from college. So if you head to a smoking shop or a convenience store, you may see a sign that something called Delta-8 is for sale. Now, some of you may not know what that is, and some of you may be very familiar with the product. Either way, it was a focus of a pretty big bill in the past legislative session. My next guest is here to break down the nuggets of said legislation and other cannabis laws. Cecily Friday is a lobbyist and executive director of the Tennessee Cannabis Coalition, and she joins us now. Cecily, welcome to This is Nashville.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question is about Delta-8. What is it, and how is it different from what is commonly known as pot?
Well, Delta-8 is a cannabinoid found in the cannabis plant. It usually occurs in small amounts, naturally occurring small amounts. What you see on the market today, however, is Delta-8 that is derived from CBD. So it's converted in the lab using acids to make the product. It's pretty much the same for Delta-10 product, THC Delta-10 products as well on the market in Tennessee and throughout the country.
Okay. Well, since we're putting like a fine point on things here, what about hemp and cannabis? What's the difference?
Well, hemp is cannabis. The distinction between hemp and marijuana is a legal one, not a botanical one. It is all cannabis.
Is it sort of like beer and liquor?
Yeah. With marijuana, you have high THC. And hemp, federally legal hemp is under 0.03%.
Okay. You know, in this year's legislative session, we saw several cannabis bills introduced, but the one that got the most attention was the bill presented by State Representative William Lamberth that would have banned THC products, including Delta-8. Break down the details of that bill for us.
Well, originally the bill was designed to ban THC products in the state of Tennessee. William Lamberth got quite a bit of a backlash from the industry here in Tennessee over that bill. Tennessee Cannabis Coalition spent several weeks lobbying against that bill and doing call-in campaigns, having citizens call in their legislators to object to the ban on THC products in the state. We have a robust hemp industry in the state of Tennessee, so a lot of the industry professionals and industry partners worked together to address this issue. After 2 weeks of our call-in campaign to William Lamberth and members of the House, I ended up getting a call from William Lamberth on my cell phone when I was on the way to the Ryman to take my daughter out to a concert. And we had a lengthy discussion about where we are with cannabis, at the federal level and where we need to go at the state level. And I basically explained to him, and this is a really important point that everybody needs to understand about this, is that with the 2018 Farm Bill, Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell federally legalized low THC cannabis. So basically what we're regulating now at the federal level is Delta-9 THC, which is just one cannabinoid out of hundreds in the plant. And so now that hemp is federally legal, the industry has legal access to cultivate and produce and dispense, a variety of cannabinoids that are produced in the plant. So it was a big game changer for the industry, and as a result, of course, we've been doing hemp in Tennessee since 2015, but since the 2018 Farm Bill, we've had an abundance of processors, cultivators, and dispensaries pop up throughout the state.
So what happened next after that phone call that you had with Representative Lamberth?
Well, once I explained to him that Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell had federally legalized low THC cannabis, the light went off. And And then the conversation changed to, okay, how do we regulate this? And so that's, and I want to make clear there are numerous other organizations that were working on this in tandem. So we were kind of hitting this from all angles. But there was finally an understanding made that, the horse had left the proverbial barn, if you will, and they needed to safely regulate this. And by and large, the industry in Tennessee has been very responsible about proactively regulating as far as age restrictions, as far as the amount of THC in products, child-proof packaging. We as an industry have largely been proactive about doing these things, and we were the ones that came to the table and said we want to have these safe regulations and consumer safety regulations put in place for the benefit of the industry and for the benefit of consumers.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekulona. This hour, we're talking about cannabis in Tennessee. So, Cecily, as mentioned, it's I want to ask you real quick, what led you to becoming a lobbyist and an advocate for cannabis legalization?
Well, I've been a political activist most of my adult life, but in 2013, I got invited to go as a citizen lobbyist to the legislature to lobby on behalf of medical cannabis in the state. I have lupus, which was a later diagnosis before that, or after that rather, and I have PTSD. So I knew that cannabis had worked well for those conditions, and I had seen it firsthand. And so that first year, I lobbied with a woman. I walked the halls of Legislative Plaza with a woman by the name of Gail Grauer, whose granddaughter had Dravet syndrome, which is a seizure disorder. And we lobbied for medical cannabis and CBD only legislation that session, and it didn't pass. And between that first and second legislative session, Chloe, her granddaughter, died. And I was outraged and furious because I knew if she had been in a legal state, she would still be alive today. And that really put the impetus on me to get more involved and help organize activist organizations throughout the state. And that's what brought about the development of the Tennessee Cannabis Coalition to educate lawmakers and the public on the consumer health and safety data that was emerging out of legal cannabis states.
I'd like to introduce my next guest. Frederick Coffin is the head of the Hemp Alliance Tennessee. Frederick, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you today.
As Cecily mentioned, the 2018 Farm Bill drastically changed hemp policy nationwide. How did it really change things here in Tennessee?
Well, one, it allowed us to fully commercialize the plant. I would say there was both positives and negatives as far as effect. From a positive standpoint, it allowed all of that research and development and the companies that started up, say, back in 2015, which Cecily already mentioned, it made it commercial, that we could legally do business. However, on a negative side, where it left some holes is what was legalized was the cultivation of hemp across all U.S. soil, as Donald Trump wrote it, as they wrote it into the bill. Where we left off is having FDA regulation and oversight over all of the products that we now have proliferated shelves across the country and right here in the state of Tennessee, and even from an economical standpoint, according to the fiscal note that the legislators came up with as they were presiding this year, it's over $200 million market in the state of Tennessee. That's good, but where we have opportunity is getting hemp defined as a dietary supplement and approved for food and drinks. Now, in the state of Tennessee, with the work that the Tennessee Growers Coalition has done, it has been codified into our laws. And that's why you see restaurants like Lab Count and other organizations that are providing it in food, drinks. But from the United States total, we still have work to do at the federal level.
What's Tennessee's potential as a location for the growth of hemp?
So let's just talk cannabis. This is something that I preach as I go locally or across the country. The South will own cannabis once our legislators get out the way and we set this up, and it's ours to lose, because when we look at when this was stopped, we own cannabis. The last contract that was done with the United States government on ropes for ships was with Tennessee. And the best, even, and I get this from people out in California, Humboldt County, that whenever I say I'm from Tennessee, one of the things that they say is that some of the best grows in the country. I.e. the illicit market, but no, this is fruitful ground for growing the plant. And so I believe that at the end of the day, the South will own the cannabis space, whether it's high THC or low THC. And then one of the other opportunities too, because we're so restrained right now, there's a lot of innovation going on in this state. We're working with one hand behind our back, and that's building our muscles. So by the time that the floodgates open, you're going to see that experience, that innovation go across both sides.
Some people only know of hemp through its association with reefer, but it has a lot of other properties. I know that hemp is being used for clothing and paper products, but, Frederick, what else can it be used for?
Oh, yeah. No, let's just talk about the plant. I truly feel that this plant was in the Garden of Eden. God is both masculine and feminine. Also, this plant is both masculine and feminine. There is the masculine side, which doesn't get a lot of attraction right now, but it will very soon. That's the male plant, and that's for fiber and grain. And then we have the feminine side, which is the one that takes care of us. And that's all of the CBD and other cannabinoids that you see coming into the market. When you look at the hemp plant, it is the one plant. Think about this. It's the one plant that can house you, clothe you, feed you, and take care of you from a medicinal point of view. And then I'll even add this. When the material that goes from the hemp plant off into being processed, the first step in conversion is crude. It goes to crude oil, and then that then gets taken down to distillate and to isolate, which then goes into products at both of those steps. If you talk distillate, those pens that you see, the vape pens, that's distillate. When you see topicals and other products, whether food or otherwise, on the CBD or cannabinoid side, that's coming from isolate. And so going back to my first point, it's the one plant that can do all of these things. And so now doubling down on the male side, masculine side, we have the opportunity. I call it Agriculture 2.0. It's all about sustainability. This plant can remediate the soil. It's carbon neutral. It's where we're going as a society and trying to save Mother Earth. And so within the state of Tennessee, we have so many companies that could benefit in reaching their sustainability goals, whether it's from textile, whether it's automotive. We at this point are the largest automotive producing state in the country when Ford signed that deal for Blue Oval City. Mercedes-Benz, BMW, VW are already putting hemp fiber into their cars because Europe already has put that mandate in place that they got to be carbon neutral, I want to say by 2030. And so I have a BMW X3. The insulation in my doors is hemp fiber. That was one of the things that the sales guys sold me on because they knew I'm in the industry. And so that particular day when I'm in the dealership and they had the new vehicles out with the hemp fiber in it, they said, "Frederick, we got something for you." They're already doing it. And so what it creates the opportunity is, well, one, there's no way that they can ship all of that material over to the United States to be able to scale this. That's where Tennessee and our local states come in, because we can grow it domestically and feed off into that system. That's benefiting our number one consumer, or I would say membership base within the Hemp Alliance of Tennessee, which is farmers.
Cecily Friday is still with us. Cecily, Frederick mentioned CBD. A lot of people have used it for health benefit reasons and other reasons. But tell us, why is there a resistance to CBD?
We honestly, of course, we're in the industry bubble, if you will, so we don't necessarily see the kind of resistance you see with CBD that you would with THC products. In fact, we're seeing broad acceptance of it. It's not psychoactive, highly psychoactive like you see with THC products. It's generally safe. The FDA has said it's generally safe for use for consumers, and it's well received, that we don't have, we don't see adverse reactions to CBD like you do with pharmaceuticals. So I think by and large you're seeing a pretty great acceptance by consumers for these products, because they work very well, they're very safe, and they're now easily accessible.
We're a long way from the days of reefer madness, but there's still the stigma attached to cannabis, right? Frederick, tell me, what do you have to say to folks who are ensconced in their opposition to pot?
Being a minority, my first thought goes to this is not a black and brown issue, and we're not destroying the world. But on another note, we have seen the benefits of the plant, as Cecily just alluded to, that we're within consumers are getting broad acceptance. However, after 50 years of talking points and using black and brown people as a political wedge to demonize the plant, we still have a lot of work to do to really change the political narrative, because the fight is not with consumers. They're loving it. In fact, when I'm out in the community, I'm meeting people who are using the product all the time. But if you're using a full spectrum, and when I say full spectrum, I mean it's not just literally CBD, but it's the whole plant, the essence of the plant, that is very beneficial to aid in, it has helped people with their anxiety and other things, right? Mm-hmm. But then where they come into issue with is full spectrum does have THC in it. And if your company does any type of drug testing, CBD, and there's cases on the books right now, you can Google it and find where employees are running into problems where their test is coming back negative because of most of those tests are just pass fail. Hey, any THC in your system? Okay, you failed the test. But literally it could be a THC, it could be CBD, full spectrum product. And so really, I would say it two ways. One, I was just up a month ago meeting with Senator McConnell on behalf of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable, which is a national advocacy group. And we were discussing how we need to get FDA to move on. It's two bills in the House. One is H.R. 841 and then the H.R. 6134, consolidated bill in the Senate 1698, which that bill would basically get the FDA to create, as I mentioned earlier, a dietary supplement approved at the federal level for food and beverage, where we have and here's what representatives were saying to me, on bipartisan, they were saying it would be great when the United States legislators, Congress would free the plant, i.e., legalize marijuana, because then it's getting ready to remove the hurdles and the challenges that you all in the hemp industry are facing, because we keep butting up to that, whether it's in banking, where banks will shut down our accounts because they're questioning after a company starts making so much money, oh, you sure it's just hemp that you're working with? You sure you're not doing some illicit marijuana? So one, it's at the legislative level. The people are ready for this. You know the polls. The polls in any state is more than 70% of our citizens are saying, let's free the plant. Right now,
Cecily,
it's just still.
I really love to get your thoughts on this, Cecily.
I want to get back to a point that Frederick brought up about the way these laws are disproportionately executed.
We got like about a minute left. Perfect.
Okay, yeah, and that is still a huge problem that we have to deal with as far as consumers go. People with children, who want to use these products, if they get drug tested, they might be at risk of dealing with Child Protective Services. These kind of consumer protections, we really need to work on and get in place, so people don't have to deal with these unnecessary repercussions.
Real quick from you, Cecily, what chances are we going to have of having, federally removing cannabis, marijuana from Schedule I drugs?
Well, I think there's a lot of support in Congress for this to happen. Unfortunately, what we're dealing with is the same thing that a lot of good legislation is dealing with, is the 60-vote hurdle that has to happen in the Senate. And, this is where good legislation goes to die. And until we get past that hurdle, we're going to continue to have this issue. I mean, as long as we have a pro-cannabis president, too, we've got to deal with that as well. Biden has said that he wants to work on cannabis law reform, but he's not enthusiastic about it. So this is where people have to put pressure on lawmakers and our president and to get movement on this issue, because there are even Republicans that support this. It's just as a party, it's a political issue. So that's where we run into the difficulty of getting movement on this issue.
That was Cecily Friday, Executive Director of the Tennessee Cannabis Coalition, and Frederick Coffin, Head of the Hemp Alliance of Tennessee. Thanks to you both for being on the show. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk with some proprietors of cannabis-based businesses to get a sense of the products that are currently available. Do you think cannabis should be legal nationwide? Tweet us your thoughts at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. Earlier in the hour, we talked about cannabis laws. Now let's turn our attention to cannabis products with some local business owners. Drea Groeschel Guinness is the president of Nusachi Hemp, and Derek Bassinius is owner of Lab Canna, a CBD and cannabis company. Drea, Derek, welcome to the show. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, Khalil.
Full disclosure, a few months ago when I moved into town and started engaging with the community, I met Derek, and we've had a few opportunities to hang out and to see the city with him. Okay, so you are both proprietors of cannabis products. Drea, I want to start with you. What is the biggest roadblock that you're facing due to its Schedule I status?
Well, first I'll say that I am fairly new to this industry. So my perspective at this point is really fresh, right? I'm fresh to the party here, and what I'm finding, I mean, I have about 2 decades worth of consumer product launches under my belt, and now at the helm of a company pushing out hemp-based products, I'm finding this web, sort of this murky web that we have to navigate to build and put together a functioning legal business. So, for example, if you want to put up a website for e-commerce, there are many vendors that will not work with you. If you want to be able to process credit cards so that the consumer can purchase your products, some credit card processors won't work with you. And often the ones that will work with you as a proprietor are charging you more because they see it as high risk, because the regulatory area is so gray and murky for them as well. So by way of the high risk, you're now in an environment where it is very challenging to start or operate a business, as well as more expensive.
Derek, are you facing similar challenges?
Oh, very much so. I couldn't echo that any louder. But yes, there is something that the industry likes to call a green tax. That green tax is just increased costs, increased pricing, simply because we are cannabis. And regardless that we are federally legal in hemp, those barriers still exist to just do good business.
Now, Drea, you mentioned before that you spent 2 decades in launching products for things. Go into a little bit more about the learning curve that you had to adjust with in launching this new product that's cannabis related.
Sure. So Nusachi Hemp is launching a beverage this July. We're very excited about it. And it's a hemp-infused beverage. And, I have never had to put together a company where literally every call I make, the vendor on the other side may or may not take us on as a business partner. I have a great example of this recently where something as simple as a copywriter, so someone who's going to write copy for advertisements or for website verbiage, literally came back to me and said, I have been advised by my legal counsel that I'm not sure we should work together because I don't think I can produce work for you and take on that risk. A copywriter. So this is really stemming, it's all around us. And when you really stack up the amount of vendorship that is challenged by should they or should they not participate in this industry, that creates timeline issues, and again, it creates further expense. But it also takes away a talent pool. So when you're looking at pushing new products into the market, not only do we want to utilize the best talent and resources we have, but we also want to ensure that we are going to be able, by language and visual content, portray the best education to the consumer to make sure there is safety met and the consumer understands what they are buying. And at the moment, that piece of the regulatory isn't in place. And so we've had to sort of skirt around different language aspects of really getting to the point of what we're actually selling. We actually can't say sometimes because it might get pulled from the shelf because technically we're not supposed to say it because it's not supposed to be in the market. Right. And you can see now this can create a lot of misinformation and misguided education to the consumer.
Now, Derek, you're big on cannabis education. It's a passion of yours. Talk to me. How did that develop?
Absolutely. So that is really a personal story. Much like many of those on this session, many of those that just exist that are cannabis proponents, it's because it had such a tremendous impact on a health and wellness scale. That's been the case for me. I had one of the worst traumatic brain injuries at Vanderbilt Trauma Center I'd ever seen. And I credit my full cognitive recovery to cannabis and cannabinoids specifically, neurological protection and regeneration. That education component is so important, not just for consumers, but obviously our lawmakers, our law enforcement, educators, children, parents. I mean, it's really changing the perception that was indoctrinated in us with the war on drugs. And that's 50 years of misinformation that we are trying to correct. And in order to get that education out there, we need to be able to have a platform to do so. And even that is forbidden, just like Dre was saying.
So, like Dre was saying, have you been in a similar situation as to where you're trying to educate, you're trying to push forward new products, but you have to be incredibly vague with everything that you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. All of the products that we make are based off of research that has been done, not necessarily by ourselves, but true research institutions and medical professionals globally. In order to bring that information to the public and to consumers, you're not allowed to just outright say, this is definitively the result of why you're taking the product. You really have to have the consumer make that connection themselves.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekulona. We're talking with people who run cannabis-based businesses. Now, let's get into the chain of supply and how that works. Jay Mitchell is an expert in cannabis cultivation, and he joins us now. Jay, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Khalil.
So, Jay, what are the most common misconceptions about cannabis products and how they are cultivated?
Well, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that this product is simple to manufacture and produce in a clean, safe way. It's quite a complicated process and difficult to bring new products to market that uphold the true safety and efficacy that we want to see as a cannabis product.
So it's not as simple as throwing seeds in your backyard.
No, sir, not exactly.
So in preparation for the show, we heard someone say that Tennessee's hemp industry is, quote, propped up on toothpicks, end quote. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think Frederick made a good point earlier. With adversity comes strength. And we've got a really strong supply chain and a group of hemp operators in the state that have been able to really create some amazing outcomes, but we're extremely limited. And, to kind of battle the regulatory framework, how it continues to change, how to, keep yourself from making claims on products. The whole process is extremely difficult and highly limiting.
So in your opinion, would lawmakers really get on board to support legalization entirely if the manufacturing and cultivation process were a little bit stronger?
Well, I think it's such a complicated topic that rule makers have difficulty understanding it completely and placing the correct regulatory framework around it. I mean, what we've seen since the Farm Bill in 2018 is the interpretation of the intention behind that bill and the ability for these operators to kind of circumvent some of the pieces to create compelling products that has clear demand in the market by consumers.
Derek, Jay, we're just mentioning about how difficult it is for lawmakers to understand that. You've been a push for education. Does what he said resonate with you?
Oh, it absolutely does. And, we really, LabCanna, our company, our perspective is beyond just selling hemp-derived products. We've grown, we've processed, we manufacture our own products. So we have that entire supply chain experience. And that's how you really get to give that accurate, apt education to those lawmakers.
Thinking big picture about the business perspective here, aside from the legal limitations, is Nashville a good market for cannabis-based businesses? Dre, I'd like you to answer that.
Well, I think the overarching answer is yes. I think we are just very challenged right now with the regulatory environment. And so I think I just want to applaud everybody on this call because there's a lot of champions out there trying to make great changes. And we're in a prohibition era. So we're blazing new trail and it's a tough road. But ultimately, there is a lot of economic value to be reaped in this localized regional area. And I think it could be wonderful.
Have any of you all spoken with your lawmakers? Jay?
Not directly. I keep a close eye on it, but it's a really difficult channel to communicate well in. And I think we've got some good lobbyists and some good groups paying attention and communicating the right things to our lawmakers.
So, these are products that people are taking into their bodies, and the quality of the ingredients is very important. Jay, you alluded to that. But there's fear that fentanyl might be used in black market cannabis products, so that's driving people to push for regulated legalization. Derek, explain to me, what's your view on this?
Well, that is exactly the reason why we push for regulation so hard. It's, very rare that a business or an industry asks to be regulated. And this is one of those instances, because having that protection and really changing the perception and cannabis shame that we've all experienced, that's where that starts. It's really making sure that we have vetted products, that the people that are checking to make sure, those regulators that are making sure that the products are safe, effective, and as marketed. That is a huge pathway forward. You're speaking towards the opioid epidemic. There you go. Why continue to restrict and prohibit this industry when it's kind of contributing to the black market side opioid epidemic?
Jay, Drea, let me ask you this. You mentioned the regulatory environment. Is there anything you want to say about the current state of things?
I think, unfortunately, especially with Tennessee, we're slow. And that lag continues to put strain on local businesses that are participating in this potential economic growth, as well as it puts consumer safety in jeopardy. So I just can't stress enough how important it is that we continue to push forward, to our lawmakers and people that are lobbying on behalf of this industry to get the guidelines and the regulations in place. It's a must.
Is this type of thing that's going to, push us back if states around Tennessee decide to move ahead with, regulation and legalization?
I don't think it's necessarily going to push us back per se, but it certainly doesn't. In some ways, it helps us push forward by way of, again, with movement around us, it begins to create a pressure cooker. And so hopefully that will create change. But, ultimately we are simply behind, and we just need to keep pushing.
Jay, I'd like to get your opinion on what changes you think we need to establish within our regulatory standards. What would you like to see?
Well, we have a bustling recreational cannabis market here in Nashville today. The only real regulation right now for these products is a limit on Delta-8 THC. So for me, I think as we talk about how do we regulate these products better, we need to be looking at the channels that these products are placed, the potency for sure, but also the packaging, and really the consumer safety piece is about potential contaminants. So this supply chain, these products can sometimes carry harmful contaminants like pesticides and heavy metals and mycotoxins that no one in this state seems to be talking about on a regulatory level. So as far behind as we are here in Tennessee, in some states we're decades behind these other more mature markets. It gives us an opportunity to refer to these more mature markets and their regulatory scope to better understand what it means to have a safe product on the market here in the state of Tennessee.
All right, Derek, considering where things stand now, and just maybe, the way attitudes are shifting, what does the future of the cannabis industry look like here in Tennessee?
That's a great question. The support is there. Agriculture and commerce is the state motto. I really struggle to see a more apt agricultural commodity that applies more in alignment. I think that there's certainly a push on the revenue side toward the money that the state could see, the money that local jurisdictions can see. That's going to be a huge positive. Fred mentioned this before, all of the applications of the hemp plant, it's essentially a zero waste crop. And the way that it can be used is really mind-blowing. The applications are almost endless. So to really restrict that, it'll really not serve our lawmakers well to continue to fight a losing battle. I do think that it is on the horizon because, like it was mentioned, there is that pressure cooker scenario and environment that we are experiencing with the surrounding states that are legalizing. That does come with a positive. We are able to learn from the legal states, the both benefits and detriments to their regulations. Sometimes they're over-regulated, and then that stimulates the wrong side of this industry. So if we all continue doing what we're doing, one of the big things, and when I say we, I mean our citizens, the nation, we've seen how the polarized opinions with COVID specifically have really raised our nation's political voice. Do that with this bipartisan equalizing and unionizing agricultural commodity.
I got to stop you right there. We don't have much time left. Man, that was Derek Bacinius. He was joined by Drea Rochelle Guinness and Jay Mitchell. Thank you all to everyone who listened to this hour. Tomorrow's strawberry season is here in Tennessee. We're going to hear from local farmers and food justice advocates about what makes it so special. This is Nashville is a production of WPLN News and Nashville Public Radio. Listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Our producers are Steve Harouche, Rose Gilbert, and Tasha A.F. Limley. Digital lead is Anna Gallegos-Cannon. Michaela Elias is our technical director. Our executive producer is Andrea Tudhope. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Namir Blade. Special thanks to Mark Montgomery, Blaise Gainey, and Tonya Lewis. Please tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find our quick survey online and let us know what you think. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekulona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.